Hey everybody, this is Angelina Papazian with River of Life Coaching, and I am a spiritual life coach with a master's in social work. If you're interested in life coaching, message me directly, or if not, stay tuned for more videos that go over a variety of different topics relating to life, philosophy, spirituality, and psychology, and how we can implement these topics into our life, and how these topics affect our life and the overall quality and direction of our life. So today we're going to be talking about navigating challenges in our relationships, particularly in groups and communities that we're part of, and deciding whether or not it's time for us to leave these types of groups or communities, and really getting clear about when we should stay and work through certain things versus when it's time for us to move on and take what we've learned and find places that are more aligned for us and healthier for us and more aligned with the kind of communities that we want to be part of. So for many of us, if not all of us, we need relationships. We need community. We need to be part of a group. We need a sense of belonging, and it is a natural part of being a human being to want and need all of these things. For a lot of people, they grow up in dysfunctional kinds of environments, or environments that are not necessarily nurturing for them, environments that are not healthy, environments that do not support them in their growth and their development, environments that want them to stay stuck because it keeps the status quo, environments that want people to stay the way they are because there is some kind of need that is being met by things staying the same without really taking into consideration whether this is actually functional for everybody who's involved and whether or not this is actually most aligned for each person who's involved in this community or this group. And it can be really difficult to be in these kinds of situations for people who are particularly in situations where they are around people who have had different types of family dynamics that were unhealthy, or if they themselves have been involved in a variety of different unhealthy family dynamics or group dynamics. It's very common to stay in environments that are familiar to us. It's very common for us to stay in environments that are very much recreating the same types of patterns, dynamics, and behaviors and thoughts that we had when we were younger, or when we were in other environments that were just as dysfunctional. And for a lot of people, it really requires a lot of soul searching and inner work to be able to actually move away from these kinds of environments and to move towards environments that are actually more aligned for us. And it's difficult to go from one environment or one group or one community to another. Sometimes it takes a lot of trust. Sometimes it takes a falling out or a big catalyst to make somebody actually move in the direction of moving away from something and looking for something different. Sometimes it takes a lot of hard pills to swallow or hard truths to swallow about ourselves to see how we're showing up in our environments, or whether or not these environments are actually meeting our needs, or if we actually feel like we belong here, or if we actually feel like we're respected and valued and are actually getting what it is that we need in our relationships or groups. And so for each of us, we have to really get very clear about what our values are and what our needs are, and whether or not these types of environments that we're part of are actually meeting those types of needs. And when we can do that, we can honestly assess whether or not we should leave or we should start to make an exit plan. Certain kinds of environments or situations might be a little bit more complicated. For example, we may find that we are dependent in some ways on certain environments to meet a certain need. For example, we might be part of a community where all of our friends and all of our relationships with people are in that community. We don't have anything outside. By leaving that, we leave a huge sense of our community, a lot of our relationships, and it can be really scary to move away from that because we, at the end of the day, are a social species and we need people in order to thrive. But some people do find that they actually are willing to take that risk and would rather be alone than be in environments that they've outgrown or environments that are not healthy for them. And in doing so, sometimes it can make space for them to actually find what belongs for them. But it is important for them to also consider that they may need a certain type of backup or supports in place before doing that or while they're doing that, because it can be very destabilizing for them when they're in the process of changing and moving away from those environments. Other people, they may find that a certain group provides financial resources or other kinds of resources that might not necessarily be monetary but are still important for their overall quality of life and other physical types of needs. by leaving those environments, they may have to go through a process of finding other resources to be able to pay, for example, pay their bills, make income, or meet other needs and find other resources. And sometimes those resources in some situations could be scarce, or they may not know where to look to find those types of resources. So leaving that environment or leaving that group can be scary, because it's like, where am I going to actually find what I need? Where am I actually going to look towards these resources? How can I actually find this? So when we're considering whether or not we need to leave a group or community, we need to honestly assess, where am I going to actually find a replacement? What am I going to need to replace or look towards? This doesn't mean that we have to always stay stuck in that. Doesn't mean we always have to wait, but each person has to decide for themselves where they're at and what they need, and they need to come up with some type of supports in place if they want to actually get their needs met overall. That does not necessarily mean that there will never be a grief process. That does not necessarily mean that it'll be easy. That doesn't mean that it'll just be like we snap our fingers and everything's all done and we're into a new place. But sometimes we may also find that it's well worth the discomfort. We may find that the grief and the discomfort and the fear and all of the pain and the heartache and the disappointment and everything and all the emotions that come up as from leaving are actually a worthwhile endeavor, because it brings us closer towards places that are actually meant for us. Now, many of us, we may find that these types of environments that we leave are caused by a certain kind of conflict or some kind of drama, if you will, or some kind of issue that happens. And sometimes it takes two to tango with those types of things. We may have to look within ourselves and see, was there any role that I played in the formation of this conflict? Is there anything that I could have done differently? Is there anything that, knowing what I know now, I would maybe tweak up a little bit or do differently if I'm in a similar situation? And regardless of that, that does not necessarily mean that we have to stay just because we had a part in it, but sometimes it is good for us to honestly assess, is it all that this environment is not meant for me? Or is it something that, maybe this environment is not what's actually good for me, but I may also have contributed to this environment not being the greatest, and what can I do differently moving forward, and how do I want to show up in my relationships and the communities that I'm part of moving forward in order to make sure that we're not recreating the same types of patterns in our new future environments and groups that we're part of. Now, there's many different things for us to really look at. On one end, we have to look at all of the things that went wrong and look at all of the things that have happened and all of the things that are not functioning properly, all of the needs that are not being met, all of the values that are misaligned, all of the ways that we may feel like we don't belong, or maybe we've outgrown this, or maybe we feel like it's not an emotionally or physically safe environment for us to be in. We have to look at all of those types of things, but then we also do have to look at ourselves and our emotions. What am I feeling right now? Where in my body am I feeling this? What emotions are coming up? What are the fears that I have around this? What are the fears that I have of staying versus what are the fears that I have of leaving? What do I think could happen and why? And what do I do with that information? What evidence do I have to support whether or not this is going to happen, whatever it may be that I'm afraid of? What evidence do I have to support that staying would be good for me, and what evidence do I have to support that leaving would be good for me? And getting very clear about this and reaching out to other people in our support system, or reaching out to somebody who's like a third party and might have a more objective and neutral stance on this and a clearer perspective, can be very helpful for this, because especially when we find that we're dealing with a lot of emotions, or if we find that we are in a situation that can be very tense or bring up a lot of things for us, sometimes it may be difficult for us to fully see clearly the whole situation and everything to consider. So sometimes having an outside perspective or two can be very useful for these types of things. Other times we may find that we have to be careful about who it is that we look towards. We may find that we have to be careful of deciding who we actually talk to about these types of things, because we may find that the people who we do talk to have their own biases, their own projections, their own beliefs and assumptions, their own ethics and morals that might be aligned with a group that is dysfunctional versus a group or relationships that are actually more functional. And so sometimes we do have to be very discerning when deciding who we actually talk to. And we have to be very discerning of who we want to include in our life, otherwise we more often than not wind up recreating the same type of patterns over and over and over again. So the more we do this, the more experience we have, the more space we give ourselves for actually being discerning about who we want to invite in our life, what places we want to go to, what communities we want to be part of, what we're going to say yes to, what we're going to say no to, and why. We can start to get very discerning about what our intuition tells us on whether or not to proceed with something. Sometimes we may find that we can go head first into something and it's a good experience. Other times we may want to take our time and really tread carefully and really give ourselves time and space to assess whether or not we need to move forward with something. And regardless of whatever decisions we make and whatever we experience, there is more often than not a lot of value that we can gain from all the experiences that we have, all the lessons that we can learn, all the things that didn't go as planned, all the relationships that we had that might have been just for a season or might have just been to serve some kind of purpose to teach us something. Whether you want to look at that as just a relationship was a coincidence and that we just had to experience what we experienced and we could take it and learn from it, or some people view it from more of a higher perspective, of a more spiritual lens, that there might have been some kind of divine purpose or reason for a relationship to happen and end the way it did, and that by it unfolding the way it did, it brought us to a new perspective, or it brought us to deeper truths about ourselves, or it brought us to new meaning and new understandings of ourselves and life and relationships and the world around us. Many people have different types of perspectives when it comes to these types of things, and sometimes it's important for us to really look at ourselves and what we actually believe and do the inner work of looking at our beliefs and assumptions and our worldview and the framework through which we're looking at life, the lens through which we're looking at life. And sometimes we may need to learn more knowledge. We might need to learn more content. We might need to actually learn a little bit more about different perspectives to see how we can apply those into our life and how we can apply those types of teachings and frameworks into our life currently and the situations that we're in. And sometimes we can find that these will help guide us to deciding what we want to do moving forward. So when we're really in these types of situations, sometimes it's good to pause and take some space to ourselves and really connect with ourselves, whether it's with your higher power, with God, whether it's with the divine, whether it's just with a friend, whether it's out in nature, whether it's just in our room or whenever we're driving or something. It doesn't necessarily matter where we go or how we do it. What matters is that we actually get quiet and really listen deep within ourselves on what it is that we need to do. How should I approach this situation? How should I look at this? What is a clearer viewpoint that I can have? What's a better lens that I can have? What am I learning from this? What can I do differently moving forward? What am I doing well on? What do I need to do differently? How can I improve? What would a friend of mine tell me if they were in my situation? What would I tell a friend if I was in their shoes, if they were experiencing a similar situation? What would a person who loves themselves do? What would a person who respects and values themselves do? What would my higher self, or a higher, more idealized, more mature and wiser version of myself do in a situation like this? How would they think about it? How would they view it? How would they treat other people? How would they communicate? Would they communicate? Would they do certain things differently than what they're doing right now? These are the types of questions that we need to ask ourselves when determining whether or not we need to stay or leave in a situation. And these are the types of questions that we need to ask ourselves when determining what kind of communities or groups we're going to enter into, or what kind of relationships we're going to enter and nurture into. It's important for us to get very clear on what our actual needs and values are in relationships and groups and communities and spaces that we're in. By knowing that and becoming more aware and conscious of that, it gives us more of an idea on whether or not things are working right. When we're honest with ourselves, we can feel whether or not something is working right, but sometimes we need to actually see it more clearly. Sometimes we find that writing it on pen and paper can be helpful. Sometimes we find that journaling or processing it with a friend or a loved one can be really helpful. There's no right or wrong way to do it. But what matters most is that we're actually making efforts to doing this. Ultimately, that is what is going to help us by just starting wherever we are, planting that seed wherever we are, and giving more time and energy to nourish it and water it and give it the sunlight and breath and air that it needs. And before you know it, it can turn into a beautiful plant or a flower or a tree over time. And the more we take more actions that are aligned with us, the more we are conscious and aware of the kinds of actions and things that we're doing, the more we're aware of the thoughts that we're practicing and the thoughts that we are nurturing in our mind, the more we can actually make choices that are more aligned with us, and to decide whether or not these thoughts and actions are helping us to step closer into the type of life that we want, the type of person we want, the type of communities we want to be part of, and the type of communities we want to build, the kind of relationships we want to be in, and the kind of relationships that are actually helping us and good for our growth and our development. Sometimes that's a good place for us to decide, what kind of relationship do I even want? Do I want a relationship that's based more on fun and leisure and just good times, or do I want a relationship that is based mostly on growth and development and having hard talks sometimes, and having conversations that might not be easy but are ultimately good for me in the long run, are helping me to evolve and grow and mature and become wiser in the long run? Or do I want relationships that are a mix of both, a mix of the challenging aspects of personal growth and expansion, as long with just the fun and free type of energy that can come with relationships? All are beautiful in their own way, and all of them have their own values. But we want to get clear about what it is that we want, and we want to get clear about why. What are we hoping that it's going to bring to us? What is it that we're hoping that we'll find in these types of relationships? What is it that we're hoping we can bring to it? So it's very important for us to also look at, what is it that I want in my relationships and in my communities and in my groups, but also, what is it I want to bring? How can I serve? What do I have to offer? What gifts do I have? How can I make this better? How can I make this keep this the way it is if it doesn't need to change? What is my role and what is my part? What is another person's role and another person's part? And how can we actually work together and dance together in the web of life? It's important for us to always look at these types of things and to really get clear about them, and to really give ourselves the chance to try new things. Sometimes it could be really scary whenever we're in a situation that we don't know how it's going to end up. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know what's going to happen, who's going to be in our life, how something's going to unfold. We don't know all the steps. We don't know the bridge of incidents that are going to happen before something happens. Everything's just all new, and there's so many unknowns, and there's so much mystery and curiosity there, but it's such an amazing part of life, and so scary at the same time. It's exciting, it's hopeful, it's expansive, it's joyful, and it's scary, and it's sometimes just really scary to go through these types of changes where we don't know how it's going to happen. Sometimes we may feel like we may not have what it takes to actually step into the life that we want to create, or the relationships or communities we want to be part of. And sometimes we may feel like it's not available to us. Sometimes we may feel like we might put all of our work and energy and time into something, and it doesn't really manifest or create anything. It doesn't turn into anything. And other times we may find that the work that we put into it is well worthwhile. So what is it that you're choosing today? What is it that you're doing today that you're doing well on? What are some things you would do differently? How do you actually want to be in your relationships and in your community and your group? And are the communities and groups and relationships that you're in right now actually helping you in some way? Are you helping them? Or is it time for you to start to move on? Is it time for you to move on, or is it time for you to have a hard conversation about the things that aren't going right, and to request things to be different, to bring that up to the people who are involved, to the appropriate people and necessary in whatever situation it may be, whatever group it may be, and be like, hey, I kind of need this right now. This isn't happening. This is my perspective. This is what I'm experiencing. This is what I'm seeing. What can be done about this? What is it that you need? What is it that I can do differently? What can you do differently? Are you able to do this for me? And decide from there. Asking those types of intentional questions can really help us to see what it is that we can actually do that's within our control. There are things that are within our control. There are things that are not within our control. And in the middle of those two is the wisdom to know which of the two it might be, which one we need to lean into a little bit more. Do I need to do things differently? Do I need to see things differently? Or do I need to accept that there are some things that I can't change, and there are some things that are outside of my control, and I might not be able to do anything about them? And how can I discern between the two of them? And then what am I going to do moving forward about the information that I have? So if you found this video to be helpful, please share, and subscribe. And if you're interested in life coaching or spiritual coaching, message me directly. I am a spiritual life coach and a master of social work. And I go over a variety of different topics relating to life, philosophy, spirituality, and things that help to make life worth living for us. So have a good day.